Ishmael's story is one of destiny, rejection, and resilience. As the firstborn son of Abraham, he entered the world under complex circumstances. His mother, Hagar, was an Egyptian servant to Sarah, Abraham's wife. For years, Sarah had struggled with barrenness, and in desperation, she decided to give Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate, following an ancient custom that allowed a servant's child to be considered the legitimate heir of the household. When Hagar conceived, it should have been a moment of joy, yet it quickly turned into a source of conflict. Hagar, now carrying Abraham's son, saw her status shift. No longer just a servant, she had something Sarah did not: a child. This change in dynamic caused tension between the two women, and Sarah, feeling humiliated, began treating Hagar harshly. Overwhelmed by the mistreatment, Hagar fled into the wilderness. But in that desolate place, she encountered an angel of the Lord, the first recorded instance of an angel speaking directly to a woman in Scripture. The angel comforted Hagar and gave her a prophecy. She was to return to Sarah and submit, but her son, whom she was to name Ishmael, would become the father of a great nation. His name, meaning God hears, was a reminder that even in suffering, they were not forgotten. Hagar obeyed, returning to Abraham's household, and in due time, Ishmael was born. For 13 years, he was Abraham's only son. Raised as the presumed heir, Abraham loved him, teaching him survival, leadership, and faith. Ishmael was strong, growing up under his father's care, learning from his wisdom, and believing he was the fulfillment of God's promise. However, everything changed when Sarah, despite her old age, miraculously conceived and gave birth to Isaac. What had once been a secure place for Ishmael suddenly became uncertain. Sarah, now fiercely protective of her own son, viewed Ishmael as a threat. Tensions rose, and the final breaking point came at a feast celebrating Isaac's weaning. Ishmael, as an older brother, interacted with Isaac in a way that Sarah found unacceptable. Some interpretations suggest he was teasing Isaac, while others believe it was a deeper act of rivalry. Regardless, Sarah saw only one solution. She demanded that Abraham cast Ishmael and Hagar out of the household. This was a devastating moment. Abraham, who had loved and raised Ishmael, was deeply distressed. Yet God spoke to him, reassuring him that although Ishmael was not the child of the covenant, he was still a son of Abraham and would be made into a great nation. The next morning, with a heavy heart, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away with nothing but a small supply of food and water. The boy who had once been the center of his father's legacy was now walking into the unknown, an exile in the wilderness, his future uncertain but far from over. The wilderness was unforgiving. The scorching sun beat down on Hagar and Ishmael as they wandered, their small supply of water quickly running out. The vast desert stretched endlessly before them, offering no shelter, no hope. Ishmael, once the beloved son of Abraham, now walked as an outcast, a boy caught between the innocence of childhood and the brutal reality of survival. The weight of rejection hung heavy on him, but worse still was the slow, creeping grip of thirst and exhaustion. Hagar, his mother, did everything she could to protect him. But as their strength faded, so did her hope. When the last drop of water was gone, she could no longer bear to see her son suffer. In a moment of heartbreaking desperation, she placed Ishmael under the shade of a small bush and walked away. She sat at a distance, far enough that she would not have to watch him die. Overwhelmed with grief, she wept, her cries lost in the emptiness of the desert. But Ishmael was not alone. Even as he lay there, weak and helpless, God had not forgotten him. The very name given to him before his birth, Ishmael, God hears, became a divine declaration. At that moment, God did exactly what his name promised. He heard. An angel of the Lord called out to Hagar, his voice cutting through her despair. "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying where he lies. The words were not just comfort. They were a reminder that even in the wilderness, even in rejection, they were not abandoned. Then, something miraculous happened. Hagar's eyes were opened, and she saw what had been hidden from her. A well of water. With renewed hope, she rushed to the well, filled a skin with water, and brought it to Ishmael. As he drank, life returned to him. The boy who had been on the brink of death was revived, not just physically, but spiritually. This was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning. God's promise was clear. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Though Ishmael had been cast out of Abraham's household, he was not cast out of God's plan. The wilderness was not a place of abandonment. It was a place of transformation. From that day forward, Ishmael and Hagar no longer wandered aimlessly. They settled in the wilderness of Paran, where Ishmael grew strong. He became a skilled archer, a man shaped by the desert, independent and resilient. The boy who had once been rejected would go on to lead a people, fulfilling the prophecy spoken over him. The same God who provided water in the wilderness would continue to guide his steps, proving that even in exile, Ishmael was never forgotten. Ishmael did not just survive the wilderness, he thrived in it. The boy who had once lived under the shelter of Abraham's household now grew into a man shaped by the harsh, relentless desert. The wilderness became his home, not as a place of exile, but as a proving ground where he forged his own identity. He learned to live off the land, to track, to hunt, and to fight. The rejection that had once threatened to break him only made him stronger. Hagar, his mother, settled with him in the wilderness of Paran, a rugged land where only the toughest could endure. There, Ishmael became a skilled archer, a warrior who could navigate the unforgiving terrain with ease. The very prophecy spoken over his life before his birth began to unfold. He would be a wild man, untamed and independent, his descendants numerous and strong. He did not belong to the settled world of cities and nations. He was a man of movement, of open skies and shifting sands. But Ishmael's story was not just about survival. He was not destined to be a lone wanderer. Even in the desert, he began to build something greater than himself. Over time, others gathered around him, men who, like him, had been cast out or had chosen the freedom of the wilderness over the restrictions of structured society. Ishmael was more than a warrior. He was a leader. His strength, his resilience, and his ability to adapt drew people to him. A tribe began to form, and before long, Ishmael was no longer just a man of the desert. He was the patriarch of a growing nation. His mother, Hagar, knowing the importance of alliances and heritage, arranged for him to marry an Egyptian woman. This was a defining moment. Unlike Isaac, who would remain tied to Abraham's lineage and covenant, Ishmael's family line would take a different path. One that was not bound by the promises made to Sarah's son, but by a promise made to Ishmael himself. His descendants would not inherit Canaan, but they would inherit the vast lands of the wilderness. Ishmael's family grew rapidly. He became the father of 12 sons, each of whom would go on to lead their own tribe. These sons, Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Guma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jatur, Naphish, and Kedema, became the foundation of the Ishmaelite people, a nomadic yet powerful presence stretching across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. What had begun as rejection had become the foundation of a new legacy. Ishmael had not been chosen to inherit Abraham's covenant, but he had been chosen for something else, to become the father of a great nation. His people would be traders, warriors, and rulers, shaping the world in their own way. The desert, once a place of exile, had become the birthplace of a mighty people, fulfilling the divine promise made in the wilderness. Years passed, and Ishmael's life in the wilderness flourished. He had become a leader, a father of tribes, and a man whose people thrived in the harsh lands of the desert. But though his path had diverged from that of his younger half-brother Isaac, their stories were never truly separate. They were bound by blood, by history, and by the Father who had once loved them both. For years, Ishmael had lived with the knowledge that he had been cast out while Isaac remained in Abraham's household. He had been raised to believe he was the heir, only to have that role taken from him the moment Isaac was born. And yet, Ishmael did not return to claim what had once been his. He had built his own legacy, one that existed beyond the tents of his father. But fate had one more encounter in store for the two brothers. The day came when Abraham's life drew to an end. The man who had once walked in faith, leaving behind everything to follow the voice of God, was now preparing to leave this world. And when the time came to bury him, both of his sons Isaac and Ishmael stood side by side once more. What was that moment like? After years of separation, after a lifetime of walking different paths, did they speak? Did they exchange words about the past, about the choices that had shaped their destinies? Or did they simply stand in silence, knowing that no words could undo what had been written in history? There is no record of what was said between them, but their presence alone was enough. Ishmael, the son who had been sent away, had returned not as a lost child seeking a place, but as a man who had fulfilled his own promise. He had become a great nation in his own right, just as God had declared. And Isaac, the son of the covenant, had lived under the promise that had been made to his father. They were different, yet they were still brothers. Together, they buried Abraham in the cave of Machpelah, the same burial site where Sarah had been laid to rest. It was a solemn act, one that required no explanation. Despite the years, despite the divide, they had come together for this one moment to honor the man who had given them life. Did Ishmael stay long after the burial? Or did he simply look at Isaac one last time before turning back to the life he had built? We may never know. But what is certain is that Ishmael left that day not as an exile, but as a man who had found his place in the world. He did not live in Isaac's shadow. He did not fight to reclaim what had been lost. He had become something else, something greater. He was not just Abraham's son. He was the father of nations. And though their paths had been different, that moment at their father's grave proved one thing: their stories would always be connected. Ishmael's legacy did not end with him. Though he had been cast out from Abraham's household, he had not been cast out of history. He had become more than just a survivor. He had become the founder of a people, the patriarch of a great nation. His descendants, the Ishmaelites, spread across the Arabian Peninsula, carving out their own destiny in the vast, untamed wilderness. His 12 sons Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema grew into powerful tribal leaders. They established settlements, controlled trade routes, and built a reputation as fierce warriors and skilled merchants. The prophecy spoken over Ishmael before his birth was unfolding before the world's eyes. He had been promised greatness, and now his bloodline stretched across the lands, influencing civilizations in ways no one could have foreseen. One of the most well-known of Ishmael's descendants was Kedar, whose people became renowned for their strength in battle and their mastery of desert life. They lived as nomads, independent and resilient, thriving in an environment that few could endure. The tents of Kedar would later be referenced in biblical texts, a testament to the legacy Ishmael's children left behind. But Ishmael's influence extended beyond warfare and trade. His descendants were deeply woven into the cultural and spiritual fabric of the ancient world. The Ishmaelites were known as merchants who traveled vast distances, connecting regions through commerce. They moved between Arabia, Egypt, and Canaan, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and traditions. Their caravans, filled with spices, textiles, and precious items, became an essential part of the world's economy. Perhaps most significantly, Ishmael's lineage played a foundational role in the faith traditions that would shape millions of lives. While Isaac's descendants would carry the covenantal line that led to the formation of Israel, Ishmael's descendants would take a different, yet equally significant path. Islamic tradition holds that Ishmael was the forefather of the Arab people and the ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad. According to Islamic teachings, Ishmael and his father Abraham worked together to construct the Kaaba in Mecca, the holiest site in Islam. This act forever linked Ishmael's name to one of the most sacred places in the world, ensuring that his legacy would be remembered not just through bloodlines, but through faith itself. Ishmael was never meant to inherit the covenant made to Isaac, but he was never forgotten by God. He was given a promise of his own, a destiny separate from his brothers, but just as powerful. His descendants would shape nations, his name would be remembered for generations, and his story would continue to be told across cultures and faiths. Though he began as an outcast, Ishmael became a man whose legacy would never fade. Ishmael's life was more than just a story of survival. It was a testament to resilience, self-reliance, and the ability to rise above rejection. Though he had been cast out from Abraham's household, he refused to let his circumstances define him. Instead of dwelling on what he had lost, he built something new. His journey teaches powerful lessons about overcoming hardship, embracing one's destiny, and finding strength in unexpected places. One of the greatest lessons from Ishmael's life is the power of perseverance. He had every reason to fall into despair, abandoned, sent into the wilderness with nothing, and stripped of the future he had once believed was his. Yet, instead of allowing his rejection to destroy him, he used it as fuel to create something greater. He did not inherit Abraham's covenant, but he did inherit a promise of his own. He refused to see exile as the end. Instead, it became the foundation upon which he built his people. Ishmael's journey also teaches the value of self-reliance. Unlike his half-brother, Isaac, who remained in Abraham's care and inherited his wealth, Ishmael had no inheritance but the land he walked on. He had no protection but his own instincts, no provisions but what he could find. Everything he built, his leadership, his influence, and his legacy, came not from an inheritance passed down to him, but from his own ability to adapt and thrive. His story reminds us that we are not defined by what we are given, but by what we make of ourselves. Another striking theme in Ishmael's life is divine providence. Twice, when he and his mother were on the brink of death, God intervened. The first time was before he was even born, when Hagar fled from Sarah's cruelty. An angel appeared, instructing her to return, and promised that Ishmael would be the father of a great nation. The second time was when they were cast out into the wilderness, when all seemed lost. When Ishmael lay dying beneath a bush, God heard his cries. A well of water appeared, saving their lives and reaffirming the promise that had been made to him. His name, Ishmael, God hears, was not just a name. It was a reminder that no one is forgotten, no struggle is unseen, and no prayer goes unheard. Lastly, Ishmael's life teaches us about the importance of embracing one's identity. Though he was born into Abraham's household, he did not remain there. He did not inherit Canaan, but he did inherit vast lands where his descendants would flourish. Instead of longing for what he had lost, he embraced what he had been given. He did not cling to the past, but instead, he walked boldly into the future God had prepared for him. His story is a reminder that rejection is not the end of the journey. It is often the beginning of something greater. Ishmael's story is one of rejection, survival, and redemption. It teaches us that even when life seems unfair, even when doors close, and even when we are cast aside, there is still a purpose waiting to unfold. Though Ishmael did not inherit Abraham's covenant, he inherited something just as powerful, a promise from God that he would become a great nation. His journey from exile to leadership proves that setbacks are not the end of the road. Often, they are the beginning of something greater. One of the most profound lessons from Ishmael's life is that rejection does not define our worth. Ishmael was sent away, not because he lacked value, but because his destiny was different from Isaac's. Many of us face moments in life where we feel unwanted, whether in our careers, relationships, or personal pursuits. We may lose opportunities we believed were meant for us, or doors we expected to open may suddenly close. But Ishmael's story reminds us that rejection is often redirection. What seems like a loss can be a setup for something even greater. His life also teaches us about resilience. Instead of mourning what he had lost, Ishmael adapted. He became a skilled warrior, a leader, and a father of 12 tribes. His people did not inherit settled lands, but they thrived in the wilderness, carving out their own destiny. In the same way, we may not always have a smooth path to success. Life often forces us to step into the unknown, to survive with limited resources, to start over when we least expect it. But just as Ishmael turned exile into opportunity, we too can turn challenges into stepping stones for growth. Faith is another key theme in Ishmael's story. Twice, when he was at his lowest, once in his mother's womb, and once when facing death in the wilderness, God heard him. This is a powerful reminder that even in our most desperate moments, we are not alone. There are times when we feel abandoned, when our struggles seem invisible, and when we question whether anyone hears our cries. Ishmael's name itself, God hears, is proof that no suffering goes unnoticed. His story reminds us to hold on, even when hope seems lost, because divine provision often comes in unexpected ways. We see reflections of Ishmael's journey in real life. How many people have been cast aside, only to rise stronger? How many have lost jobs, relationships, or opportunities, only to later find their true calling? Some of the greatest leaders, innovators, and changemakers in history have stories of failure, rejection, and struggle. Yet, like Ishmael, they did not allow those moments to define them. Instead, they used them to build something greater. So what does Ishmael's story mean for us today? It means that our struggles are not in vain. It means that rejection is not the final word. It means that even when we feel lost in the wilderness of life, God still sees us. And most importantly, it means that we are not forgotten. Like Ishmael, we too can rise stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the destiny waiting ahead.